Tonight on the Your Life Matters Show podcast.
One of the biggest misconceptions is just that, all kids are fine. Kids, it's like, kids are resilient. Absolutely. People are resilient, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect them. I mean, traumatic experiences, when we look back, I mean, we remember those. We remember and feel those. And, they imprint upon us that significantly. So children see and hear everything.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you made the choice to watch our show this evening and joining us for another episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast with your hosts Steve Hodgson and Dr. Eric L. Davis.
Tonight's episode is titled, In Their Eyes, How a Parent's Pain Shapes a Child World. Every day, millions of children wake up in homes where someone they love, it could be mom or dad, is fighting a battle with mental illness. And while we often focus on the parent's pain, there's another story unfolding quietly in the background. The story of the children. Children become experts at reading moods instead of bedtime stories. They smile on the outside while holding confusion, fear, or guilt on the inside. They grow up wondering if they somehow cause it or if they can fix it. Research estimates that 15 to 23% of children worldwide live in a household with at least one parent who has a mental illness. Children of parents with mental illness have a higher risk of developing mental health problems themselves. Beyond mental health outcomes, children exposed to parental mental illness often show lower health-related quality of life, including physical and psychological well-being. One Life Course study found that children exposed to parental mental health problems had consistently greater distress across adulthood, and they did not catch up to peers who were not exposed. Host Steve Hodgson and licensed psychotherapist Dr. Eric L. Davis sit down to talk about what these children experience. From the youngest who just want mom or dad to smile again, to the grown adults still carrying the echoes of childhood pain. We'll explore how families can protect, heal, and strengthen those bonds, even when mental illness is part of the story. We'll explore how grown adult children have to deal with their elderly parents' mental illness later in life. Because every parent's struggle matters, and every child deserves to be seen and heard and understood. Please welcome your hosts.
Well, howdy, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast. We're so honored to have you with us this evening. And my name is Steve Hodgson, and of course, I'm here with my co-host, the suave and sophisticated licensed psychotherapist, Dr. Eric L. Davis. Dr. Davis, we're going to do something a little different tonight, because usually we talk about, something mental health that somebody's suffering from, but we don't realize what it does to the people around us, especially to the children that are around us. And plus, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that you have a mental health issue. Sometimes it's even relationship issues can cause mental health effects on a child. So that's really what we're going to start to look for this evening. But before we start the episode, as always, let me introduce the sponsor of this podcast, Waypost Counseling. Now, Waypost Counseling is a practice owned and operated by our very own Dr. Eric L. Davis and his wife, therapist Erin Davis. Now, if you're needing assistance anywhere in the United States, please give them a call. You can do sessions online. You don't even have to be there. And if you don't live in the Indiana area especially, it might be a long trip. So please take a second and watch us, and watch this video, especially from Waypost Counseling.
Let's face it, life can feel like too much at times. Stress, loss, big changes. They can leave us feeling lost. But taking the step to reach out for help, that takes real strength. That's why Waypost Counseling exists. Founded in 2020 by Dr. Eric L. Davis and licensed therapist Erin Davis, Waypost Counseling was created to be more than a counseling office. It's a place where people are heard, supported, and given the tools to move forward. Waypost Counseling offers more than just therapy sessions. They provide individual and couples counseling, specialized help for problem gambling, and consulting services. Their team supports adults facing ADHD, grief, addiction, relationship struggles, and major transitions in life. The name Waypost captures their heart. It's a marker along the path, helping you see where you are and where you want to go. Therapy doesn't have to feel overwhelming. At Waypost Counseling, you'll find honesty, warmth, and practical solutions that create lasting change. Whether you're in Indiana or anywhere in the U.S., you can connect with them in person or online. Don't wait for the perfect moment. The first step is what matters. Visit waypostcounseling.com or call 317-762-0904 to connect with Dr. Eric Davis, or 317-659-0179 to reach Aaron Davis. Waypost Counseling is certified by the Indiana FSSA Division of Mental Health and Addiction and the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Abuse. Remember, you know that your life matters, and right now your next step matters. Make the call today.
Well, every day, millions of children wake up in homes where someone they love, mom or dad, is fighting a battle with mental illness. And while we often focus on the parents' pain, there's another story unfolding quietly in the background, and that's the story of the children. See, children become experts at reading moods instead of reading bedtime stories. They smile on the outside while holding confusion, fear, and even guilt on the inside. Now, they grow up wondering if they did something that caused all of this, or if maybe they could fix it if they just could figure out how. Yet, you see, a lot of us don't realize that children believe their mother and father are acting the way they are or are angry. It's all their fault. They're the ones that caused them to act that way. And they end up keeping a lot of that bottled up inside. So in today's episode, it's titled, In Their Eyes, How a Parent's Pain Shapes a Child's World. Dr. Davis and I will talk about these children and what they're actually experiencing. From the youngest who just want mom and dad to smile again, to the grown adults who are still carrying the echoes of childhood pain. Now, we're going to not only explore what young children experience, but we're also going to look at what older children are going through with their senior parents when mental health issues like dementia show their ugly heads. We'll talk about the guilt they experience, the struggle they have, the balance of helping their parents, as well as caring for their own family. We'll explore how families can protect, heal, and strengthen those bonds, even when mental illness is a part of the story. Because every parent struggle matters, but just as importantly, every child deserves to be seen, heard, and understood. So I've talked enough already. So let's get right into this. Dr. Davis, when we talk about children living with mental illness in their homes, how common is the issue in your clinical experience?
Honestly, I mean, in my clinical experience, I would say the vast majority of families have someone in some mental illness affects so many people that I'd say there's mental illness in just about every family.
Well, not only that, but I mean, some of the people you might be seeing that's dealing with anxiety or something now is from holding all those pent up feelings from when they were a child and watching their parents go at it.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I've seen neighbors do that, where they're arguing. It's like, well, but we're arguing nicely. Yes, but you're doing it in front of the children.
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
They don't understand you're arguing nicely. All they know is mommy's yelling at daddy and daddy's yelling at mommy.
Yeah, they don't. That's the thing with children. I'm sure we'll get into this more, but children don't have the same frame of reference that adults do, and they aren't aware of different mental illnesses and different situations. So, children do internalize everything.
So, what are some of the first signs that a parent's mental health challenges might be affecting their children, even if no one is talking about it?
I think if you're seeing changes in behavior, or if I'm a firm believer, I tell everybody, trust your gut, because I believe that we feel how we feel for a reason. And if things just seem off or not right, if you feel like something's going on, at least look into it.
Mhm.
See if there's something to that.
A lot of times, there's a commercial. I don't know if it's still being shown on TV. I haven't seen it in a while. But a child wanting to go to the park and play, and they want their mom to go with them, but mom suffering from a mental illness. I don't remember which one, but where she wouldn't go outside, didn't want to go out in public. And that child's like, okay, and is sad and depressed. And, the parent feels that. In the commercial, you could see the mom's face, feels that, but she doesn't know how to deal with her own struggles,
Yeah.
and sees the effect on the child, but is not really grasping how important that is to the child. And in some ways, I can't say I blame them. They're dealing with their own mental illness. But I think a lot of parents just don't have a clue of what they're doing to their children.
Yeah, I agree.
We learn as, we get older. Now, I'm older. I'm going over the other side of the cliff. But I mean, I catch myself sometimes, even to this very day, of acting like my dad.
Yeah.
My mom was still alive. She used to tell my wife, just let it go. He's dad's just like that. And when you hear that, you start, oh my God, okay. That came out of my mouth. Okay, I don't believe that just came out of my mouth. But yeah, it happens to all of us. So are there differences in how children react depending on whether the parent's illness is visible, something like depression, versus something less understood, like a bipolar disorder or even PTSD?
Yeah. Oh, I think absolutely. If you think about something like depression, okay, because depression, it manifests internally, but also you see symptoms externally. So that'd be a good example where if the parent is, experiencing severe depression and they're, bedridden, not wanting to get out of bed, a child doesn't understand, that there are different, things going on. So they may internalize that as, well, I'm not good enough. If mom loved me, she would spend time with me. She'd get out of bed to spend time with me, so I think a lot of times it's children internalizing things in the best way that they can, based on their worldview, but that puts them at a disadvantage because they don't know as much as adults.
I think basically they're just reacting to what they see.
Yeah.
They don't, there's no depth in that vision of what's going on. They just see mommy staying in bed, and she's not bed rotting. Okay, as we talked about
Right.
last week, she's just, she just can't get out of bed. I mean, just mental illness, and it's sad. Hopefully there's like two parents around,
Mhm.
and one of the parents can help guide the child through that. So, and try to explain to them that it's not them. But I think even then, am I correct? I think even then the child still internalizes that they did something,
Yeah.
or they could do something different that will make mommy jump out of bed and want to spend time
Uh-huh.
with me.
Yeah.
And that's sad when you look at that. Now, from your perspective, what misconceptions do families often have about how much children know or feel when a parent is struggling?
I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is just that, all kids are fine. Kids, it's like, kids are resilient. Absolutely. People are resilient, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect them. I mean, um, traumatic experiences, when we look back, I mean, we remember those. We remember and feel those, and I mean, they imprint upon us that significantly. So children see and hear everything, you know.
It's funny. I noticed the other day that our pets do the same thing. And
Yeah.
that might be something that, people can pay attention now. I don't have children here, but I know sometimes when Jen and I disagree about something, at this point now, we've probably moved to the new house already. But, with different things about the house, how, colors of a room or something else,
Yeah.
I notice when we start to argue with each other or loudly discuss a topic, all of a sudden the two dogs, the two boys, start acting up and they start roughhousing and they start, causing, I mean, going wild. And I never noticed it before, because you're in the heat of the argument, you turn around, stop, you cut it out or something. But I realized the other day that they're playing off of us.
Mhm.
And I think the same way with children, children start to react that way as well,
Yeah.
with their parents. When their parent they start to just lose it. It's either that or they're going to sit in the corner with their hands over their ears, and not want to hear it. So they're going to start acting out. And like you say, knowing that and watching for that is so important. We're going to start off with the dad. Okay, usually we go with women first, but we're going to blame the dad first. Now, a father's involvement is crucial for a child's development, positively impacting their emotional, social, cognitive, and behavioral outcomes. Involved fathers provide security, model healthy relationships, and encourage independence and self sufficiency. Boy, these are tongue twisters. Their presence is linked to better academic performance, higher self esteem, and lower rates of delinquency and mental health issues in children. And I think, we can all agree with, you have your dad around, there's that sense of security. I was going to say full sense, but it's not a full sense. It is that sense of security that
Yeah.
dad's going to watch out for everything that's going on there. So how might a father's depression or anxiety shape the emotional climate of a home?
I mean, really, it changes everything. I mean, it changes the whole feeling, in the house. It changes all the interactions. It's it's having everything go through the lens of the depression or anxiety. And if a child doesn't know that someone's depressed or anxious, they don't understand why it would be difficult for someone to emotionally regulate.
I hate the idea that a kid thinks that it's their fault
Yeah.
for everything that's going on. So how can partners and co-parents support children when dad is the one that's actually struggling?
I think, explaining or trying to explain to kids, what you can in a way that they can understand. And I think what's most important is that they understand it's not their fault. It's not something, it's like, um, when a parent gets sick with the flu, it's not the child's fault. And just making sure that kids know that it's not something they're responsible for is pretty important.
And you're not going to go, your dad's crazy, so just don't worry about it. I mean, you have to listen, have the child talk a
Yeah.
little bit, and you should be doing that anytime anyway, is let the child talk because you may be talking over here and the child's over here, and you're not listening to what the child really wants to talk about.
Yeah.
So, what long term messages might sons and daughters carry into adulthood, especially about masculinity, vulnerability, or even emotional expression when they grow up with a dad who's battling mental illness?
I think so the answer to that's kind of a twofold thing. There's how families deal with information, like they talk about what's going on and so forth. But then we're also talking about like rules, roles, norms, these cultural things in families. So let's say that on average, so I'm going to be really generalistic here, men are raised, to be stoic, strong, don't show weakness, you don't need help, but, do it yourself, pull up your boots and make it happen, like rub some dirt on it, you're okay. So we really, I mean, like, masculinity, if you will, we are taught, you don't show vulnerability, don't show weakness, all these things. Whereas females typically are, in general, raised to be softer, more caring, motherly. Part of what happens though, um, is in adulthood, like as a man, to deal with mental health things or things going on, I have to be vulnerable. And that is a tall order sometimes when we're raised not to show vulnerability, not to share about our feelings, and I talk about that with a lot of my men clients, where it's like we were raised to, don't show weakness, don't show feelings. And then you come here to therapy and I'm saying, now we need to talk about your feelings and you need to be vulnerable. And, so I think that that's one aspect of it where that can not only affect the parent, but the child also, and sometimes those roles that we try to fill may even prevent us from getting the help we need.
When you started saying that, I thought of all the pictures of like our dads or before them, our grandfathers, who never smiled in a picture.
Yeah.
You couldn't get them to smile.
Yeah.
It's always that stoic, look, and it's like, come on, smile,
Yeah.
I mean, heck, they wouldn't even wear their glasses in pictures. They had to take their glasses off to keep that real solid look and, and I mean, and then we flip to probably Gen Z generation now, where, I mean, some men are crying over a cup of coffee. So
Yeah.
we've sort of, we've gone the full gamut, but yeah, I know our generation, and even I'm sure yours and stuff, looked up to their dad because they were strong.
Yeah.
And they were always there. They were that solid rock. And I can only imagine what dealing with mental illness, how tough it must be for that dad not to show that weakness too. That's on there.
Yeah.
So we'll go to mom next now.
All
Okay.
right.
Mom. Okay. A mother is critically important to a child's development as the primary attachment figure who provides crucial emotional security, guidance, and foundation for future relationships. Her presence shapes a child's emotional well-being, cognitive growth, social skills, and character through love, care, and by modeling healthy behaviors. Now, the quality of this early relationship, it significantly impacts a child's ability to develop trust, regulate their emotions, and form positive relationships throughout life. Now, we're talking about not only daughters, we're talking about sons as well. Now, we talked about the commercial, what's before earlier on. It's really tough because that child starts to think, I'm not going to, that's it. I don't need to spend time. Here's a better example. How many times we start to see in a household, not a loving household, because that's the way their household was when they grew up.
Yeah.
Mom and dad didn't show affection towards each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now you want me to show affection towards you in front of the kids. I can't do that.
Yeah.
That's not how I was brought up. So how does a mother's mental illness, especially if they're suffering from depression or postpartum struggles, affect attachment and emotional development in young children?
It can prevent that stuff. So if, attachment's a really important thing in our upbringing and in our childhood. So if a parent is not, like, if they're not there to attach to, that can be a problem. If all of our interactions are not loving, that's, it can affect things from going the way they need to, ideally.
We see on too many shows, but I watch Steve Wilkos show and stuff all the time too,
Yeah.
just for entertainment. Sorry, folks, but you see people that come on there and they're talking about their mom. Well, my mom's never been there throughout my life, or my mom was a drug addict, or she was a prostitute, and they don't have that connection with their mother.
Yeah.
Yet I still think they do. It's just really hidden back there, because it's still their mom. No matter what, I mean, even, the most steadfast boys that, say, I'm strong like my dad, still have that weakness because they're still a mama's boy. No matter how you look at it, it's still their mom. Say something about their mom and watch what comes out really quick. So as children grow, so do sons and daughters. Do they experience mom's illness differently, boys and girls?
Probably somewhat, just based on the different dynamics, but it would affect both children, I mean, significantly.
Because I could see, a girl who's trying to model her life, her future life after her mom,
Yeah.
and then a mom struggling with mental illness can be really hard on a child, because how do they get that focus? Luckily, a lot of times there's another female like the grandmother who'll step in and be there for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, how many times you hear, I was raised by my aunt or I was raised by my grandmother, because they stepped in and they helped when mom couldn't,
Yeah.
for numerous reasons. But so in your practice, how do families separate the illness from the person so that kids understand that mom loves me even though she's sick?
I think, understanding what the illness looks like, it's kind of like with depression, once a person understands, what to look for, they can see that, the exhaustion, the heaviness, those things, and they can understand that it's not that is what's causing it, not, them not being good enough or them, not being loved enough.
Yeah, because they need to understand that mom loves them even though she's sick.
Yeah.
And she doesn't love them any less. She's just unable to present that love right now, but know it's
Yeah.
there. Yeah. So, and I guess co-parents and extended family members, as I just said, what can they do to maintain stability and warmth for the kids during these times?
I think, being a source of stability, being a rock that child can rely on to be there, and um, you know, providing some consistency for a kid.
Now, I know you mentioned earlier on that you're watching for signs. Okay, I don't think we went really too far into it, but we said acting out and stuff, but I mean, are there other signs that we need to look for? I mean, if they could be a number of things, but what are some of the really standout ones that we should be watching for?
If a person is, not getting out of bed, if they, are seeming unlike their self, but consistently, you know, um, everybody has an off day here and there, but people don't typically have, an off month or even an off week. So I think it's just watching for anything that seems off, and then taking a
So
look at
like
it.
even if they decide to like all of a sudden now they're staying in their room,
I
they're
mean,
not
yeah, I
hanging
mean,
out with friends.
I
Yeah,
would look into all that stuff. Yeah. I mean,
right.
because if it's not normal for them, there's probably
Mhm.
something to it.
Right. And that's just in general we need to watch for because there's so many um situations that would play
Yeah.
for, whether they're being abused and all that, we bullied, we need to watch all of that stuff. So can you explain how routines, play or communication styles can buffer or worsen the child's anxiety in these homes?
Yeah, absolutely. Body language is everything. If I go, I love you so much,
Uh-huh.
is that really what I mean? Is that the message that you're getting? Is that I love you? No, it's like, so making sure that body language is consistent. Definitely trying to approach things with empathy. I mean, really, it's not so much truly understanding what someone's going through, but being willing to try and understand what they're going through. And I think that a lot of times especially with mental illness, I think it's really important that we understand there is, we've made strides as as the human race and everything, but there's still a lot of stigma. There's a lot of stigma surrounding mental illness, and um, mental illness is not something that you can just try harder. It's like, man, if trying harder solved, these things, people wouldn't have a problem. It wouldn't be an issue. So I think that's one of the biggest things is when you talk to, your loved ones or whoever about how they're doing, believe them. Listen, um, and let them know it's okay if they're not perfect or if they're struggling, that you'll love them anyway.
Yeah, I think a lot of kids too, if their friends see that mom or dad has a problem,
Yeah.
will start, oh, well, your mom's crazy,
Yeah.
type of thing. And, that's going to only make the child separate from their friends
Mhm.
because they don't want to hear that. They're already
Exactly.
struggling with the fact that, the mom has a mental illness and now the friends are ripping, and children are doing it for I mean they're doing it just to bother the other
Yeah.
person, obviously, but they're not doing it to, knowing that they have a mental illness and don't care. Children only have that perception and it really plays up from that. Schools and teachers can play a big role in identifying and supporting these kids.
Yeah.
But I guess they really need to be told that mom is suffering from depression or
Mhm.
dad suffering from PTSD.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
how
something
can
that I'll
teachers
say
help?
this, when I grew up, my biological dad he had alcohol use disorder. Okay. So he had
Mhm.
alcoholism. And I remember when I was really small, I just remember there were times where I was perceptive enough, even as a 4 or 5 year old kid, that I knew something was off, but I didn't understand enough of, I didn't know addiction was a thing. So I didn't really understand that, oh, there's a reason for this, and it's these drinks or whatever, but I just knew something was off. And so that's always kind of stood out to me where back then I just remember feeling that way, like something's weird, but I had no idea what it was.
What it was exactly. So
So,
I
so
want to
understanding that, then I'm so sorry. So
no again.
understanding that, it was important for me as I got older, kind of understanding why that was happening because it had nothing to do with me, you
Hmm.
know?
What I was going to start saying. As a child you didn't understand, but as an adult now
Yeah.
you start to understand some of that. But we also need to release what we kept inside all those years as well.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that stigma still exists that people don't want to release that. Like you said, I'm supposed to be, macho
Yeah.
and, those things aren't supposed to bother me. Yeah, but inside they're tearing me apart. And I don't realize that I'm taking it out on my wife and stuff. And there's no reason for me to be taking it out on
Yeah.
my wife. So, but I, not only young children exposed to this, I want to talk about adult children a little bit, and those that have to suffer through a senior parent's mental decline and illness. Now, I have firsthand knowledge of this myself, as my father, who's in an assisted living facility, he's 94 years old or 94 years young, as I like to say, but has to have constant attention and care from the nurses and even sometimes the doctors. See, he fell a while back and broke his hip, and he refused physical therapy because he just said, I'm old and, that's not going to work for me. So now he's got to walk around with a walker. See, he lived alone in New York City to about 90 years old. God bless him. I mean, had his own apartment, walked up and down 2 flights of stairs every day. But as he aged, his mobility suffered. And my brother and I had no choice but to put him in an assisted living facility. My brother, God bless him, has to deal with a lot more than I do because I'm not there. Okay, we usually have a recap at the end of every day, or if he's really getting on my brother's nerves, I learn about it during the day as we go on. So I mean I'm used to that, but many adults still carry wounds from growing up with a parent who's had mental illness. Now, do you commonly see this in your therapy work with people, and how do you get them to acknowledge that a lot of that comes back from their childhood.
From childhood. I think that, kind of walking back through the past as we have more life experience changes the way things look. It's kind of like, a little kid is in the dark and, oh no, there's a monster in the closet, and then as time goes on, you realize, oh, it's a shirt hanging there on a hanger, and that looked like a person. I mean, so we kind of do the same thing in therapy, but in as emotionally safe a way as we can, where um, the client will bring up something from the past that bothers them, and we kind of go back and walk through that and see what it looks like based on what we know today.
That actually reminded me when John Petrocelli, the hypnotist, was talking about how we'd bring them back to a certain spot.
Yeah.
And, what are you feeling at that point and stuff,
Mhm.
and that's really what it's all about. You have to go back and face it head on and stuff.
Yeah.
But I had to laugh to myself how my mind thinks when you say, the monster in the closet, well, as you get older, you find out it's just a ghost. It's in the
Yeah.
closet.
Yeah.
That's bothering you. And then you call a paranormal investigator. But okay, I stray. How might guilt or role reversal, parentifying the child, show up later in life?
Absolutely. So that is one of the most common things where, as a therapist, that's a dynamic that I see typically have some problems later on, where the child is basically the roles are reversed, where, for example, mom's dealing with substance use and she's drinking all the time. And now the child has to be the parent, and on top of trying to take care of their self, which their parent's supposed to care for them. So they're trying to take care of their self and take care of the parent, so I see a lot of role reversal type things really seem to come out more often in adulthood than other things.
See, I can go with my brother as an example because my dad lived with my brother for a while before we put him in assisted living. Um, where my dad always wanted to control a situation. He was New York City police officer for years. I mean, he always wanted control. And I find it humorous myself, sitting back watching almost as a third party. But luckily, my brother is aware of how he tries to turn things around. Like right
Yeah.
now, he's going through the phase he doesn't want to be in the place that he's at. So, I think I told you about this off air. He thinks now the cartel has invaded the assisted living facility, and he's got all these things he tells. Oh, they took me, they held me down. The cartel. It's like, why would the cartel care about a 94-year-old guy? Okay, but it just said, "Get me out of here," type
Yeah.
of situation. And I get it. And my brother, he has health issues himself. My brother's in his 70s, and
Yeah.
he's got two grown children, and his wife has health issues. Yeah, it's tough. On a child that now the child has to play parent, as you said, the roles change,
Yeah.
and the parent thinks you're going to be there for them all along. No matter what, and you are, but to a degree. I can't, there are some people who just give up their entire lives, but there are a lot of people that can't give up that life.
Yeah.
They got children they have to take care of too. So, so for those that are caring for an aging parent with ongoing mental health challenges, what boundaries or coping skills can help them preserve their own well-being?
You know, it's kind of, I always go back to on a flight, when the flight attendants are talking about takeoff and all that, they say if the oxygen masks come down and you have a
Mhm.
child with you, they always say, put yours on first, then put the mask on the baby. And I remember the first time I heard that and I thought, what? How dare they? And then it was like, oh, well, if I pass out, I can't take care of the baby. So, I mean, really, self-preservation is everything. And we have to um, protect our own well-being. We have to, so unfortunately, sometimes family members have to kind of draw a line where it's like, this this is as much as I can do, and they that's really hard. It's really difficult a lot of times.
Yeah, because the child now becomes a caregiver.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we've talked so much about how a caregiver has to care for themselves also,
Yeah.
and that's the prime situation. So how can adult children start to rewrite the narrative to move from pain towards understanding and even compassion?
I think a lot of times, just talking about what happened and how you felt about it, whether it's with a therapist or not, talk with somebody you trust, talk with one of your friends, and be vulnerable and talk about, what happened, how it felt, those things do affect us later in life. I mean, they do. Um, they shape our self-talk, that takes place in our mind. It shapes our beliefs about the world and the way we see everything. So what we find in therapy a lot is there's a lot of negative self-talk that people experience that really doesn't, it's only coming from them, it's only coming from their self, but based on experiences from the past, where if someone talked down to them all the time, then maybe that's kind of that's the messaging that they've picked up on, and they may think they're not good enough, whether that's completely untrue.
Yeah, and when you listen to those voices in your head, as
Yeah.
they say, it it's just what you're programmed.
Yeah.
It's like a computer and AI. AI can only do what it's programmed to do.
Yeah.
That's why if you ever look on the site that says, to check the information, because what AI may be telling you may not be correct. And I think we talked about this in one of the other episodes where somebody asked AI a bunch of questions and said, this is your choice here. It's yes or no, but if you can't, or been one thing but you can't say it,
Yeah.
here's the other lifeline to answer it. And how many times it answered the other, that other way because it's been programmed to something. And that's the same thing with your brain. Your brain is programmed
Mhm.
to it, and you have to fight that, and you have to, you know, seek help for it. I mean, like we've said on this show, I think one of the main reasons of this show is that there shouldn't be any stigma, and there's no sin in asking for help.
Yeah.
Think about guys when you're lost on the road. Okay, we don't want to look at a map or look at GPS today. Okay, and we always say, "No, I'll find it. I'm not lost." Okay, no, I'm not lost. 2 hours later, dang it, I know I'm not lost. Okay,
Yeah.
so you remember that store over there? Okay, we passed that. Yeah, we passed that 5 times, but yeah, we passed that. I'm not lost. I still know where I'm at. Yeah, you're still lost. That's where you're at. So we have to admit at one point, hey, maybe we need to ask for help. So
it's the lightning round.
well, now it's time for our lightning round. Yes, this is the segment where I ask Dr. Davis a few questions, and he'll give some quick, concise, sometimes even just one sentence or even one word responses. So here we go. Number one, what one feeling kids most often hide when a parent is struggling?
Fear and sadness.
Two, what one word that describes how a parent's mental illness can silently shape childhood?
Connectedness.
Number three, the biggest myth you hear about kids in these situations.
That they don't have a clue what's going on.
For one thing a parent can say today that makes a huge difference for their children.
I love you.
Not said enough. Number five, what helps children more, words or consistency?
Consistency.
Six, what one thing every child of a struggling parent needs to hear?
It's not your fault.
Seven, one small act of self-care that really matters for adult children who are still affected.
I think communication, and I mean communicating with others who have experienced similar things. And I think that's one of the things I really want to drive home, while we're kind of on that is I can't speak highly enough of different support groups I mean, really there is help all around, but it's kind of like an underground network and you just have to look. But if, there are tons of groups. There's children of adult alcoholics, I mean, or adult children of alcoholics. There's all sorts of um, organizations, parents of addicted loved ones. There's, tons of organizations, Al-Anon, Gam-Anon, Nar-Anon, like there are organizations for families of afflicted individuals, and those can be really helpful.
We don't need to be fearful of that. I mean, even myself, I'm part of lung groups, different ILD groups. And even when I had IPF at the beginning, and you discuss, hey, is this normal that
Yeah.
I'm feeling A, B, and C? And when you see like 100 answers, yes, don't worry about it. You'll go through it, but you'll get past. It's that same thing. The people are
Yeah.
feeling that. And even same thing with show we did last week on long COVID. Okay,
Yeah.
there's a number of support groups that are out there for people who are suffering, and I joined one or two for the show information, but I still see people saying, "Hey, how do I deal with the constant cough? Is there something that helps a little
Yeah.
bit?" And yeah, and that kind of bonding and that kind of information is so important. Okay, number 8, one habit you see in resilient kids that stands out.
Communicating.
Number 9, if you could teach one coping skill to every family in this situation, what would it be?
Don't take things personal.
10, and the last one, hope in one word.
Love.
And love is so important.
Yeah.
I mean, the heck, even a few weeks ago, we even spoke to Love Inc., if you
Yeah.
remember. And do you remember if you remember, the girl was saying, um, we love you. I love you.
Yes.
I love you. And that word is so important. And when people start to really realize what they're saying and start to feel that, that's when changes start to happen.
Yeah.
So if a parent feels like they've already done the damage, what would be your advice to them?
I stop doing the damage. And it's like, well, I wish it were that easy, but I mean, honestly, like if you're a parent and, things have kind of gone sideways and you want to make things right, address the problem, face the problem head on and do whatever you have to do about it. I can't stress enough. There are so many individuals that the only difference between them and someone else that dealt with the same what type of thing, whatever it is they asked for help, you know? And I mean, I can't stress that enough. If I had not asked for help years ago, I wouldn't be sitting here. I have no doubt about it. It's help is everything.
There's that we all hear the thing, the new norm. Just you have to start.
Yeah.
At some point it has to start, and don't expect the child just to jump at it and say, "Okay, oh, well, all right, it's all over. Things have changed." But if they see, we said this earlier, I may have even been question number 5. What helps children more? Words and consistency. Consistency.
Absolutely.
Because they're not stupid. You do it for a couple of weeks and they think that's fine. You go right back to it.
Yeah.
But if you consistently stay that way, then even older children start to realize, okay, maybe there is something a little better going on here and things are going to get better. Now, can family therapy or parent-child communication exercises make a measurable difference?
Absolutely. Yeah, it can make a big difference, and if you find yourself and you're having a breakdown in communication, therapists can help with that. Family therapy is extremely effective, couples therapy, I mean, really, it's a lot of it is just figuring out how to communicate, you know?
Because a lot of people just want, whether it be couple or even family, just give up on it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you know what? He's going to be an a-hole. He's going to just do what he wants. He's not going to listen to us. He's going to sit at the table with his headphones on, look at his phone while we eat and stuff, and we'll take his food to his room. He did, just
Yeah.
doesn't care. And you can't give up on that
Right.
because that's the worst thing you can do to a child, is just give up on it. So, are there moments in therapy sessions that you see that healing has started?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, I see a lot of like the light bulbs go off for realizations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's an amazing thing to see. I love seeing it.
Oh, I'm sure. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago about watching, the guys that mow lawns, on
Yeah.
YouTube. It's that all of a sudden that instant gratification of, wow, okay, you
Yeah.
transform someone's big problem, and now they're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I can maintain this, myself, okay, and
Yeah.
that same light going off, you see it in the people's eyes when they come outside, and they're like, shocked. I think that the people's reaction is probably what makes half the video, the
Yeah.
importance of a video. So, what would you say to a parent listening who feels ashamed or afraid their mental health might be hurting their children?
I would say that, if you're if you're concerned about that, you feel that way for a reason, most likely. So seek some help. There is no shame, no shame. I mean, this is something that people deal with, and there's help available, and all you have to do is ask for it and be ready to receive it.
And if you're ashamed to go into a place, we talked about at the beginning of this episode with way post counseling.
Yeah,
You can do stuff from your home. When the
absolutely.
kids are at school, your husband's out at work, it's perfect time. You can do it from your house. Nobody's, I think a lot of people feel ashamed walking into, um, a therapist's office.
Yeah,
Who saw me go in? Or even worse, if you go in there and you recognize somebody, in the
yeah,
waiting room, you start to become really, really uncomfortable. And I could see that being, a good way out of everybody's way and, doing it from your house. So I'm going to ask the final question. I feel like Karnak, magnificent. I hold in my hand the final question.
all right.
Okay, finally, how can communities, schools, and counselors help ensure no child suffers silently?
By keeping the lines of communication open. I mean, really, that is, as long as the lines of communication are open, that's a great sign. But, when we have to make sure that kids especially are comfortable to tell us something, you know, um, and so that I think that really is one of the most important things anybody can do is, just try to listen, try to, hear what a child is saying and make sure that they understand that, we care about them and we're there to help them.
A lot of times we talk about teachers being underpaid for all they do because there are a lot of the good, caring teachers
Oh yeah.
that recognize that, little Johnny is now acting completely different. And little Johnny is clamming up,
Hmm.
They may even see it in class and participation or the way they want to say communicate, but interact with the other kids in the class. And that teacher might be the one that can stand up and help that child,
Yeah.
before it gets really, really bad. So the truth is, mental illness doesn't exist in isolation. It lives in families. And while children may not have the words, they have feelings and they feel everything. They feel every one of those words. So if you're a parent who's been battling your own mental health challenges, please hear this and remember your illness does not erase your love. Also, getting help isn't weakness. It's one of the most loving gifts you can give to your child. And I'm going to go even a step further to yourself as well. And if you grew up in a house shaped by mental illness, know this, you're not alone. And your story doesn't end in pain. Healing is truly possible. Understanding is possible. Rewriting your story and your future with compassion is absolutely possible. So we encourage you to reach out, to talk, to share, seek support, because every voice, every story, and every life truly matters. So we hope today's discussion gave you some insight and encouragement. If this episode resonated with you, or you know someone who might need to hear it, please share it with them. I think there is a share link, which I didn't even realize on YouTube all this time, that there is a share link. You can share the show with someone. And don't forget to subscribe, leave us a comment, hit that notification bell so you won't miss upcoming episodes. Now, you can visit our website at yourlifematterspodcast.com for more information on your show and where you can find your official, Your Life Matters. Where is it? There we go. Okay, your official Your Life Matters podcast items.
They're magic. They disappear.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. See that? You can hold it in your hand and nobody knows you have it there. And as always, thank you all for joining us. We live in an age where violence seems to be the replacement of being civil and talking about our differences. Everyone seems to have a huge chip on their shoulders and ready to fly off the handle and do some senseless things. Dr. Davis and I implore you to tone down the rhetoric. We've been talking about this every week, and until it happens, we're going to talk about it every week. Disconnect a bit from the news and the politicians on both sides. Remember, we are real people. We all breathe the same air. We all live on the same planet, and we all bleed the same. So every step you take is part of your unique story. Embrace your worth. Keep moving forward. And remember, no matter where you are in your journey, you are valuable and you are important. Take time to cherish yourself and those around you. And never forget your life matters. God bless you all, and I hope you'll join us next week for another new episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this week's new episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast. Please be sure to join us again next Thursday for another great episode with your hosts, Steve Hodgson and psychotherapist Dr. Eric L. Davis. Please remember to subscribe to our channel if you have not already done so, and hit the like button and leave a comment. Your help with this helps us reach a wider audience that may need our help.